All right.
Oh,
All right,
okay,
I'll stand way up. All right, let's get started.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So welcome to the kickoff for the I Am the Cavalry track. And just to be really, really clear, we are not the cavalry, you are. So we're going to give a quick 5-minute primer for anybody that's brand new to this. But we actually launched here 2 years ago here at BSides. So it's our 2-year birthday.
Yeah.
And we're going to both frame the day, but also explain what the journey's been like thus far and why we're very encouraged by it. So 2 years ago, where were we?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a little historical piece, it started with a lot of conversations between Josh and I. My motivations for getting involved were different. We're different than Josh's. My motivations for having these conversations and starting to talk about this had a lot to do with the criminalization of security research.
Okay.
It was where my motivation started, and then it shifted to having conversations and talking about human life and public safety.
Yeah. Yeah. So just as a short introduction, 2 years ago we were finally motivated enough that what we saw was the problem statement that kind of unified us was that our dependence on connected technology was growing a lot faster than our ability to secure it. More specifically in areas that affected public safety and human life. So automobiles, maybe you saw those in the news recently, medical device hacking, critical infrastructure, the Internet of Everything basically being the Internet of hackable things. So what kind of unified us, whether it was my research on Anonymous or his juice cleanse nightmares about how we were going to have to get licenses to be security researchers or programmers, or that we might increasingly criminalize this like we've seen in France and Germany and South America, and even domestically there's things like Wassenaar and whatnot. In fact, right now, Jen Ellis is talking about a lot of the laws that threaten, if they're implemented incorrectly, they really threaten our profession and our hobby and what we do in a way that would not be so good for public safety. So initially when we launched, we said we wanted to address issues that affected body, mind, and soul. Body was the public safety issue. Mind was the increased criminalization of security talent. And soul was the mashup between civil liberties and cyber. And yes, we're going to say cyber a lot here because the people we're speaking to, that's the words that they use, right? And cyber's on the news every single night. And Congress critters use the word cyber. And part of being a good ambassador and the heart and soul of the cavalry movement is to be an ambassador. If you go to France, you don't speak in English. It's, you want to learn the language, learn the customs. You want to have the empathy to meet them more than halfway and find some common ground. So the idea behind the cavalry is we had looked high and deep as far as we could. We got pretty far along in our careers. We found the adults in Washington. We found the adults in Europe. And what we realized is the cavalry isn't coming. No one's coming to save us. For things like this, we are the voice of reason. We're the voice of technical literacy. And if we don't try to do some things and experiment and fail fast and iterate, then we're just going to be screaming in the darkness and talking amongst ourselves in the echo chamber. So while I have deep love for both of the debaters on the keynote stage, that cynicism isn't solving anything. And finding more and more 0 days isn't really changing the incentive structure within which we find ourselves. So the cavalry was really just a personal statement that you would make, that you're going to try something, and you're going to try to raise the conversation, get outside the echo chamber, and be that voice of reason. So we deliberately targeted public policymakers, the general public, and those 4 industries. Very quickly, though, Bo, who wasn't even at our launch because he was presenting opposite of us, really jumped in head first. What was your introduction?
Motivation.
Yeah, so I kind of got introduced to Josh over some Yamazaki.
Yeah.
In the speaker room that day, and really my motivation was just I saw that we have the ability to change things, to make things better, now more so than ever. And so taking that instinct and putting it into action, I saw a lot of promise in what some of the security community had done, and this being one of the leading efforts, as well as some of the things that a bunch of other people were talking about. So the ability to actually influence change and to be effective, to not just continually be frustrated and banging our heads against the wall because we couldn't find that better way.
Yeah. I guess I was going to say we introduced on that first day a concept that we called fuzzing the chain of influence, which sort of goes back to you were saying we're going to try, we're going to fail, we're going to keep trying, we're going to keep failing, and then we're going to find ways to influence the right people and get the right people motivated. And I think that's still true today. And we'll talk about some of the things we've been working on, but.
So you'll see throughout the day we're going to have a couple different chunks on the agenda. We're going to have Karen, who's been really passionate, enthusiastic person willing to try to fuzz that chain of influence and be a good voice and be a good ambassador. We're also going to have a focus on duocracy. So Chris Nickerson, Tim Krabeck, Bo, and Todd Beardsley from the Metasploit Project. We're going to talk about how do you actually lead volunteer stuff, because our culture generally doesn't like to be joiners, right? We're very solo actors. We don't like to do things in groups. So how do you actually get progress and tangible results in a duocracy? We're also going to have quite a bit of update on our progress with medical. And we've had some pretty stunning breakthroughs recently on making medical devices safer by working with the right stakeholders in the government, in the medical field, the right white hats at the right time, pulling in Katie Mazuris and others for the ISO coordinated disclosure type stuff. So we're going to give an update on that later today. We also have had probably the most impact on the automotive industry. And while we didn't have a sexy video on Wired, we have built really serious trust relationships with these guys. And we have a few things to announce on that front this afternoon. But one of the things we want to do is show some of our progress. We'll probably get to that in 1 or 2 minutes here. I had some things I was going to say today. I'm going to change my mind a little bit after having a fairly cynical dinner with lots of really good researchers that just have convinced themselves that nothing's going to work. And I think maybe one of the defining characteristics of this, and Katie Mazuris was the one who put it in our heads in the first place, it's not our technical skill that's making this thing work. It's our empathy. And I thought I was born without it, right? It's not the kind of trait you would think would be useful here. But she basically said, Josh, if we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves first. And we're really defeatist, we're really negative, we look for what's wrong with something. If we're going to be effective teammates, we need to build those muscles. And the further we get into this experiment, 2 years later, every single thing that's worked has been because we looked for what was right with something. And we used the language of the target that we were speaking to, whether it was Congress critters, the FDA, the device manufacturer. You know, they have similar goals to you, they just have different experiences than you. And I think the heart and soul here is when you see a coordinated disclosure policy come out from United, most of our friends pointed out everything wrong with the United disclosure policy. Instead of saying they're going to crawl and then walk and then run, and what we should do is celebrate it anytime someone says, we're not going to sue researchers who test stuff and report to us. We want to start that learning curve. And what isn't seen, because we don't get the headlines, and I don't mean to be negative here, but for a moment, what isn't seen is the treatment that United received from our friends mocking their coordinated disclosure policy got a different airline to decide not to do one. Right? Because these guys they're putting a little baby toe in the water to see, maybe we'll just let people hack our website. And when their toe got bit off by vicious piranhas, who would ever get into the water, right? So I'm not trying to judge us. I think the idea here is, for this to work, it's not so much our technical prowess in our 0 days. It's our willingness to be a helping hand instead of a pointing finger. It's our focus on future success instead of past failure. It's coming with an open heart to be a teammate instead of being someone telling them what they're doing wrong. It's encouraging the good choices they make so they start a journey. And what we want to do is, if you look at Microsoft, it took them from probably 15 years for their mean time to enlightenment. They used to, our friends used to frame their letter on their wall saying, here's the threat I got from Microsoft Legal about the bug I was going to report. And now they have Blue Hat, and they have 6-figure cash prizes, and they treasure the collaboration. They need it. Their software development teams depend upon collaboration with third parties. If that was a mean time to enlightenment of 15 years, we really need and want to compress that to 3 to 5 years for auto and medical and things like that. So I would just encourage you for the next couple months, and the fact that you're in this room probably means you have a better attitude, but there's plenty of things these guys are going to do wrong on their learning curve, but this is year 1 of their learning curve. And what we found is when we're patient with them, and when we engage them, we get invited in. We'll do a full-day workshop with the Food and Drug Administration 2 weeks ago? They'll have us asking questions. We'll accelerate their learning curve. We'll understand why they're stuck and they can't do X, Y, Z like we want them to, but we'll find out they can do A, B, C instead. And I think that open heart it's the one thing that's going to change our fate. Because right now we're fighting a losing battle. And how do you win in a losing battle? You change the rules of the game. So between Jen Ellis, myself, there's some government folks in the room. I think I've done 200 congressional briefings. Jen's probably done 300. And we've gotten to the point now, and you're going to hear about this later in the car and medical thing, but the committees that are asking and forming law for automotive cyber safety are basing a lot of their questions and source material on the 5-star that we launched 1 year ago. So I would say 2 years into this, the experiment is working. Now it's slow, you have to build trust, and the people who have gotten involved have learned it's less about tech prowess and more about translation. But if you want to decide that nothing's going to get fixed, there's plenty of people in the echo chamber to console you. If you want to try some new things and you want to build some of those soft skills, we're finally seeing the fruits of that, and we have a couple surprises peppered throughout the day. One of those surprises is right now.
Right. So we've got some very good friends in a lot of great places, like in Europe, where it's a little bit different than the U.S., where we've spent a lot of our time in the U.S. just because we're geographically located here. We've been able to take kind of a different tack. In Europe, we've had some really good outreach, thanks to folks like Klaus and others who've really picked up the idea that we can get safer sooner. And one of those is a company called Draeger, and this is a quick video. We pre-recorded this because we know the demo gods being what they are, we can't count on any live demonstration over Skype. So this is
maybe say
just a quick film.
Who is Draeger?
Yeah, so they'll introduce Draeger. Draeger's a large medical device manufacturer over in Europe. They do a lot of other things as well as medical devices. So I'll let Hans introduce himself and Draeger in this short video.
Tech fail.
Hey guys, I'm Hannes Molsen, the Product Security Manager of Draeger, and thereby responsible for maintaining and improving the security of our medical products. We are a 125-year-old family company from Lübeck, Germany, with nearly 14,000 employees, creating technology for life. If you think you haven't heard of us, you still might have seen us, for example, in hospitals with our ventilators, monitoring solutions, or anesthesia machines, or you might have seen our oxygen tanks and masks being worn by firefighters, or Marines using our diving equipment. Whenever it comes to compressed air, you are very likely to come across our products. Customers, users, operators, and patients that are connected to our devices, they literally entrust their lives to our products, which is why their safety is one of our top priorities. People get used to interconnected devices in their everyday life really fast. Their demand for smart appliances grows way faster than their need for security. It is important to make sure that our devices and systems are hardened enough to withstand a connected environment. Josh will instantly replace connected with exposed, so to stay with this term, exposing them adds a whole new class of threats. In the past, it was just the device in a closed environment. Adversaries needed physical access to hack the device. This in turn means when a device was hacked, it was a targeted attack against that particular device. Now this changes when we start to interconnect all those devices, maybe over a hospital network. By exposing them, they appear in port scans. They can become subject to several forms of collateral damage, be it from malware like CryptoLocker, by automated scripts to run mining operations, cryptocurrency mining operations, for example, or just the average computer virus. Connected devices can also be one stop on an adversary's path through the network to steal information, like patient data. But no matter how much you spend on training, software quality assurance, testing, and verification, there is still the programmer's law of nature, with its inevitable number of 5 to 50 flaws per 1,000 lines of code. And suddenly you go to fail. There are several types of vulnerabilities. The ones you fixed, the ones you know about, and the ones you don't know about. But the worst kind of vulnerability are those that you don't know about, but others do. For us vendors, a lot of those others might be you, excellent security researchers, acting in good faith and being a willing ally to us. At Draeger, we would like to make it easy for you guys to reach us, which is why we are preparing a coordinated disclosure statement. The statement is in its review process right now, and in addition to internal feedback, we are also getting very valuable feedback from the security community, for example from Bill Woods. Once published, it will be reachable via draeger.com/security. It gives you the contact email address, which is product-security@draeger.com, together with our PGP public key so that you can encrypt the sensitive information that you send to us. You can find the key also on public key servers. We give you some guidance on what you should include so that we can reproduce the issue faster. Plus, we'll describe what happens then and how you will be kept up to date or even be involved in the resolution. For now, it remains for me to wish you a great time in Las Vegas. Thank you very much for your attention and keep up the great work. We are all the cavalry.
Very cool.
Yeah. So in case you missed that, or in case the video didn't record it for posterity, that's a major medical device company committing publicly to engaging with this community on equal terms, on equal footing, in an incredibly clueful way. Draeger and Hans are very smart about what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're very plugged into the security research community, and some of the work from some of the people in this room have inspired them to be better. So that's another commentary on everyone in this room being part of getting things safer sooner.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you have worked in the medical device field, their legal teams and their PR teams are very close, just like in the automotive industry, just like the airline industry. So we've basically found a really clueful, passionate hacker teammate in pretty much every one of these organizations, desperately trying to do the right thing. And one of the things that I really liked about Hans was he tracked the cavalry stream, he tracked the five-star automotive cyber safety framework, which is designed for cars but also meant for medical. And he's changing his program every time there's some positive press. He uses that as internal collateral to do what he always wanted to do in the first place. And there's people in this room at other medical device companies. If you know Mike Murray, he quit his own company he started to go work inside GE Medical to make things safer sooner from the inside. And he's been slowly adding people like Joe Sicoli and other hackers to his staff to work on the inside. So I think this idea that these industries are clueless isn't really the case. What you have is really smart people trying to do the right thing who needed teammates on the outside. And if you ready your heart for it, and if you get engaged, there's plenty of injection points for these things. There's also typically plenty of job opportunities to maybe stop being whatever we're doing here and getting upset with it and maybe go inside and fix it. So I'm super encouraged that this is typically something they won't want to do, but we're hoping other companies now follow suit and add a coordinated disclosure policy. And when you go read it, if there's things wrong with it, we will quietly work with them to grow and mature it, but please praise its existence because the alternative is a legal and adversarial tone with these companies. So we're a little short on time for the opening ceremony, about 5 minutes left if I recall. Is that correct?
Yeah, about 5 minutes of speaking and then we can throw it open for Q&A.
Okay, so I was too long-winded before, but one thing I want to point out for people that didn't see it is 1 year ago on our birthday, we published a 5-star automotive cyber safety framework. And we're going to go into great detail on that later. But if you look past the word auto, there basically starts with premise 0 is that all systems fail. So we've been taking the attitude not of scaring people, just saying these things will fail. Whether it's accidents or adversaries, they will fail. So there are really 5 ready postures towards failure. The casual one I basically say is tell us how you avoid failure. Tell us how you take help avoiding failure. Tell us how you notice and learn from failure. Tell us how you have a prompt and agile response to failure, and tell us how you contain and isolate failure. The more formal names are what is your safety by design? So tell your customers how you do your SDL. Second one is do you have a published coordinated disclosure policy? Say you will not sue third-party researchers acting in good faith, which is a form of insulation for us against things like DMCA and CFAA, civil suits. Number 3 is do you have a black box to learn from failure? These guys were simultaneously screaming at us that there was no evidence of hacking. Well, none of them had any mechanism to ever have any evidence of hacking. So we want to break that circular logic. Number 4, do you have secure updates? So is your response time to a hack a manual USB key sent in the mail with a 3% uptake that could be implemented incorrectly? Or is it a full remote over-the-air update securely like BMW did, where all of their customers were patched before anyone knew they were even vulnerable? Right? So what we're trying to do is help them get over the hump on secure updates. And the last one about separating critical systems from non-critical systems is who cares if the stereo gets hacked? Who cares if they blast it on the hip-hop station? As long as it can't also shut off the brakes or kill the engine. And because we haven't segmented critical systems from non-critical systems, we don't want to fix one bug in one infotainment system in one vehicle manufacturer. We want to fix the industry by making sure that their future designs are separating the critical from non-critical. And by really focusing on less about by PCI checklists of security products that don't work, we've really focused on avoiding failure, taking help avoiding failure, noticing and learning from failure, prompt and agile response to failure, and containing and isolating failure. And Bo and others later will tell you what they're doing for the medical 5-star. But this, as the foundation of how do you create areas to collaborate together, has been one of the reasons the empathy has been working. So we have the heart of a servant, the willingness to speak their language, meet them at their level, start them on their journey. And most of them were doing some efforts within one or more of these product categories or these solution categories. The idea is not that we're going to prevent these things from being hacked, it's that we're going to be readier when they do. And the ultimate goal, and my final word on this, I guess, is our intent 2 years ago is to make sure we were safer sooner. And I think the last couple of weeks we've seen, and some of the surprises throughout the day, is it's working. So we really hope that you advocate, participate, and start building those empathy muscles.
Want to open up for some questions?
Questions?
Yeah, so we've got about 5 or 6 minutes for questions. We also, courtesy of the phone system, the old-fashioned thing that still runs pretty well, we have Hans Molson from Draeger on the line in case anybody wants to ask any questions of him. Karen, do you have a question or are you just stretching?
There's also a microphone right here, which you guys probably use that. This way it'll get captured in the recording.
Yeah.
Hi. So a question about perhaps using the reputation of the people who are participating in order to support the vendor efforts. So right now, as far as I understand it from what I've read, it is done behind the scenes, like in direct work with the vendors. And you've said that there is a lot of cynicism going around about the vendor effort. So if it would be portrayed as a joint effort with some of the people who are reputable researchers in the security community and presented as baby steps, as you called it earlier, perhaps this would lower the level of cynicism, or at least frame it in some way?
So you're saying that when they come out with their coordinated disclosure policy, if one of us was jointly praising it? Okay.
If you were just, or at least framing it, right? Saying, okay, so this is not the best that could have been expected, but this is what they're trying to do, and we are behind it.
Or coordinated support of their of their announcement of that
right.
type of policy.
Yeah. I think the thing that breaks my heart is there were people that were planning to say we're not going to sue researchers, and they were going to announce it this week, and they're not going to do it anymore because of a bunch of reasons. But if we understand, and I don't want to treat them like children either. I think they're doing really good work. They're trying really hard. Some of them have been trying to get a coordinated disclosure policy for 3 years. I'm just suggesting to us that some of us can change our conversation in the echo chamber to point out what people are doing right? So lately I used to ask people what was the best thing, the worst thing, key takeaway from any talk they heard. I've started asking people what was the biggest surprise or what was the best part, and that's all I ask. So I'm trying to change the pH balance of the way we talk to each other. Or how can we build on this? So look at it like a little ember instead of a fire. Like we can, put the ember out instantaneously, or we can, cultivate it and foster it and turn it into a bigger issue. So I like your suggestion, though. We could do more overt support, and I think we did that with BMW. When they got hacked, everyone was making fun of them, and we said, here's the 5-star. Here's 2 of the things they did really well. This is actually a success story. They didn't sue the researchers. They did an over-the-air update. During the over-the-air update, I don't know if you read our post-mortem, they actually were passing the updates in the clear. But they noticed it and voluntarily told everybody in their announcement so that other people that might also have been passing their updates in the clear could start using SSL. So I think we should be focused on where we need to be as a society and where we want them to get to, and then understand it's going to take a lot of time to get them there. I don't want to be patient about it, but I want to be realistic about it, and that's where the give and take comes in. Anybody else?
I think it would take some positive examples from well-known researchers that are active in this particular area to come out and say, look, I reported to that vendor, and they were actually cool, and they acted responsibly, and they fix stuff. And because obviously, most of the time, these disclosures is how badly the vendor reacted.
Right.
They tried to hide it, they said they'll fix it, they didn't fix it, or their fix was broken, and that sort of stuff. some positive examples where researchers are satisfied to some degree with the response they got from a particular vendor or some vendors.
And that becomes, yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we need more of that. I think what researchers we know run up against is that many of these organizations are so immature in their handling of these things. This is the first time they've ever had a critical vulnerability reported. And so that's where more companies having the coordinated disclosure policy, we're going to be able to see those things. So the next time, Drago receives somebody follows that process and basically goes through and actually has some success, we should then highlight that and celebrate it, that this is a success. If someone was to submit it to a company that does not have one of those policies, that's where you hear the horror stories from.
Yeah, I was asked a couple times, and my answer varies depending on the day they ask me, but I said, if you could only do 1 star, which star would you do? And I think it's the coordinated disclosure policy, because I think that changes the idea that researchers are a threat to researchers are somebody that can help us. And as they get more bug types, they'll start to get better pattern recognition. Because the Microsoft SDL is pretty darn good right now, and they still have a lot of bugs every Super Tuesday. So they went from the idea that people might find bugs to, oh wait, people are going to find the right bugs, we can prioritize the bugs, we can look for patterns of bugs, and it fueled a positive virtuous upward spiral. And I think once we can see they can start to see us as teammates and a valuable addition to their on-staff security team, that's probably the right thing, which is why I was so discouraged to see us scare away a few this year. I still think a few of them might come through, and that's why I'm extra thrilled with Drager here for taking a leadership stance. I think what's going to happen as well is the free market's going to see, wait, this company cares about security more than these ones. We're going to put our business there. So it's not simply passing laws like Rob Graham was poo-pooing, but we are actually working with several committees to make clueful, geek-designed policy changes as well that might actually make it easier to do the right thing. All right, I think Karen's up.